Hi, everybody. It's November 25th, 2025, and I'm in the middle of doing my 10,000 steps for today. And these videos are part of my journal of my recovery from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Kierans, 64, with Down syndrome, be locked away by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government for 588 days or 178 missed scheduled visits. Paul was locked away when I complained to the Burnaby RCMP about what I found out to be, what I believe to be a fraudulent and forged power of attorney that the British Columbia government created to give Paul a COVID-19 shot on February 1st of 2021. And then on March 27th of 2024, the Burnaby RCMP were ordered by their Ottawa Oversight Agency to proceed with investigation into this, what I allege to be a fraudulent and forged power of attorney. So they created an application to have me declared a vexatious litigant, which is a rare designation that takes away my access to the courts of Canada. And they did that to discredit me as a witness in this police investigation into their fraudulent and forged power of attorney. And it worked because I've never been interviewed by the Burnaby RCMP. And as far as I know, they never bothered to investigate this fraudulent and forged power of attorney. And Paul died 26 days after the Court of Appeal of British Columbia dismissed my appeal of the appointment of my Catholic nun sister in Ontario as Paul's guardian. So where things stand now is I've been designated as a vexatious litigant, and I've applied for permission to appeal that designation to the Supreme Court of Canada. All the documents were filed on September 3rd, and I'm still waiting to hear back from the Supreme Court of Canada. The likelihood of being granted permission to appeal is very low. It's 5%. I think only 40 out of 800 applications were granted last year. So that's where things stand now. I'm just waiting to hear back from the Supreme Court of Canada. But what I did today, my hobby is military history. So when I'm sitting at my desk waiting to hear back from the Supreme Court of Canada, I do research on military history, in particular Canadian military history. And today I saw a really interesting video about something I'd never heard of before. When my mother was dying of cancer in 2004, she got a hold of a mirror somehow. She was lying in her hospital bed, and when she looked at herself and she saw how gallant she was, she said, "Oh, I look like Bergen-Belsen." And I knew exactly what she meant. Some people might not know, but Bergen-Belsen was a Nazi extermination camp that was liberated by British and Canadian troops. And so it would have been in the news. My mother would have been 26 years old with 4 little kids at the liberation of Bergen-Belsen. So it would have been on her mind. It would have been something she would have been thinking about. But the video I watched on YouTube today was about how they how the Canadian lieutenant colonel by the name of, I think, Dunkelman, who was actually Jewish. When he came upon Bergen-Belsen, they found the Canadian British armies found that even though the extermination camp had been liberated, people continued to die at an incredibly fast rate. 300 to 400 people a day would die. They would die because they drank too much water, and they would just, once it hit their heart, they would keel over and die after not having water for a long time. Or if they ate a full meal, they would die. But even with the best efforts of the military doctors, everything that they could do at Bergen-Belsen, it just wasn't working. And he estimated that, I forget within how many days, 20,000 people would be dead. And so he did some kind of mathematical or statistical calculation, and he recommended something that was considered to be radical or revolutionary at the time. Was he said that they should invest all the resources in moving the internees out of Bergen-Belsen as fast as possible to the nearest normal village or town within 13 to 15 kilometers, rather than trying to treat them at the camp. And that went against the medical orthodoxy, which was they should treat them right there. That these people were so incredibly medically fragile, they couldn't possibly survive being transported away to a nearby village that was not affected by, hadn't been bombed out by the war. But he stood up to the generals. He was only a lieutenant colonel. He stood up to the generals. They had a meeting about this. I believe he was a medical doctor. And the Canadian general, or actually I think it was a British general, went along with, he said, okay, we can't get worse because these people are dying so fast and we just can't stop it. So it couldn't possibly get worse. We'll give them a shot trying this experiment of just basically throwing these people into the backs of army transport trucks and transporting them as quickly as possible to the nearest town that was not bombed out. And they started doing that. And he was right. And I forget what they estimated how many lives they saved by using his technique of dealing with these internees of Bergen-Belsen. And it was just a really interesting little bit of military history that I had never heard before. But it just showed what an important impact Canadian forces had. They punched way above their weight in World War II. The other video that I watched was, and I don't think I'd ever heard this before either, was that when they went back and they read all the notes of German generals and German who were on the ground about what was going on during the war. The country, the forces, they were armed forces the Germans were terrified of were Canadians. The Americans were green. The American forces, to a large extent, were green, were not well seasoned, although they had all the best equipment, and there was lots of them. And the British were really worn down by that point because they'd been fighting since September 3rd of 1939. But the Canadians just fought like hell. And they didn't hold back. And they were just they fought smart. They fought very coldly and brilliantly. And pound for pound, the Germans were far more afraid of the Canadian forces than anyone else. And when they knew they were facing Canadian forces, they were really terrified. Oh, one last thing is I saw a video about General Guy Simons, Simmonds, who was the mastermind behind the Canadian forces breakout in the Battle of Normandy. And his brilliant contribution to the war was fighting at night. What he found was that they just couldn't move, because if they only fought during the day, when there was light, the Germans could see them coming. And so what he found a strategy of using radio communications to coordinate where every tank was. And he put Canadian forces in armed tanks, not armored personnel carriers. And they all moved in a coordinated fashion at night, the dead of night, when they couldn't be seen. 700 armored personnel carriers, and they broke through the German defenses in Normandy when the Allies were bogged down in August of 1944. So anyways, that's what I learned today while I was sitting around waiting to hear from the Supreme Court of Canada about whether I'm going to remain a vexatious litigant and be foreclosed from going to court or even defending myself in Canadian courts. That's it for now. Thank you all, and take care, everybody. I love you all.